Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're really delighted to welcome everyone to our MMRI Seminar Series overview. And it looks like we have several people online today. I think there's a lot more online even than here. So we welcome questions from the audience. Please use your chat if you're online to leave questions for the panelists for today's session if you would like to participate. So I'm delighted to say hello. My name is Maria Contreras. I'm the Executive Director at the Masonic Medical Research Institute. And today we'll be talking about lupus insights and approaches. Are we closer to a cure? And I'm excited to introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Samantha Lassamer from here at MMRI in the Contreras Laboratory. She's currently a postdoctoral fellow. And Dr. Ioana Koenig, who's from upstate and hopefully soon the Masonic Medical Research Institute, and working exclusively on lupus and immunology-based research. So welcome, ladies. It's nice to have you here on the panel. So today we're going to be talking about information with respect to lupus and discuss the causes, the latest scientific discoveries, current treatment strategies, and ongoing challenges for patients and for researchers in trying to figure out what the mechanisms and the causal genes might be that are associated with the development of that particular disease. So we hope to be able to explore some of these discussions with our panelists today. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started and ask some questions that might be helpful to the audience. And maybe I'll start with you, Ioana, if that's okay. Maybe you could tell us what lupus is and how does it affect the body?
So lupus is an autoimmune disease which affects every part of our body. So it is one of the immune diseases which can affect from a brain to your eyes, heart, kidneys, joints, every part. It's very difficult to diagnose because it can affect so many parts of our body. And in principle, in simple way to explain this, unfortunately, in our lupus patients, what is happening is that our own immune cells, which normally are supposed to defend us from all the microbial environment or during injury or anytime we do not feel well, unfortunately misfire at the times when they should not and attack our own organs. And our goal is to dampen the immune system when needed and not have it go to a party.
And I know that it primarily affects women over men. Maybe Samantha, you can help us answer why you think that might be, that women are affected, primarily minorities, and women of childbearing years. So is there an association with estrogen, or what might be the causal mechanisms associated with that?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'm sure we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to answer. And one of the really fascinating things about immunology is there are sex determinants within the immune system. So a woman's immune system is actually very different from that of a male's, in that a woman has to have certain tolerances in order to carry a child to full term. Because of that, a lot of genes in the immune system are carried on the X chromosome. Those genes are controlled and their expression is controlled by different hormones. We don't actually fully understand how that regulation happens. It's, I think, one of the unfortunate side effects of the landscape of research for the last 200 years, and that it's been dominated by male models and by male models of disease and by structures that disadvantage women's research. What is really curious about it, though, and I've always found fascinating, is simply just treating mice with hormones doesn't make them any more likely to get autoimmunity. So it's probably a secondary effect that we have a very hard time trying to tease apart with new technology that's coming online, with the fact that whole genome sequencing, RNA sequencing, proteomics has become so cheap within the last 10 years. I mean, you'll remember this, but I remember when I started in the lab as a PhD student, it was probably upwards of $15,000 to sequence one human genome. Now it's about $120.
$1 million when the Human Genome Project came out. That's pretty outrageous.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think with the expansion of technology, we'll be able to get answers into that. Unfortunately, it's a a question I don't have a nice clean answer for you.
Yeah, and I find it really fascinating because a lot of the literature suggests, in fact, that estrogen does not play a role in the development of lupus. And yet we still see that there is this increased incidence. And one of the major differences, obviously, between men and women are the hormonal changes that women have. And interestingly, in men, we see that they develop autoimmunity, but a lot later in life. And we have some hypotheses about why that might be happening that also have to do with loss of specific types of hormones. And so there is probably a pretty good pool of data that suggests that there is something that's neurohumoral in the development of these diseases. But if you were to think about, outside of genetics, obviously you have to have genetic predisposition. And what we're beginning to discover about a lot of these diseases is that you need environmental triggers to turn them on. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more. In particular, I'm interested about viruses. And I know that's kind of your area of specialty, and in particular because so many other diseases of late, like including multiple sclerosis and obviously ovarian cancers and various types of other ailments are specifically targeted by specific viruses. So do you think that viruses or other environmental triggers might be the turning on these genes that are causal to the development of this disease?
That's a fantastic question. And yes, what is really important to state, the pathways in these immune cells which try to attack you, which are upregulated actually, are those principal pathways which are supposed to defend us from viruses. So if we have a virus chronically activating those pathways, even when the virus clears the cell and the cell cannot switch it off, you're gonna develop autoimmunity. So I personally work not only with viruses, but as well other environmental exposure like UV radiation or pollution or smoking, which can actually mimic viruses in activating our immune system. And what is interesting, sometimes viruses can leave behind proteins or other things which our cells recognize as danger, and they can signal and activate those pathways long after the virus has gone out of our body. And trying to understand why this is happening, it's important to identify whether the person, we can stop this activation without taking away all the immunity and predisposing the person to other infections. So it's like a little bit of a chicken and egg. We have to be always ahead of the danger in order to protect ourselves, and on the other hand, regulate ourselves to behave the right way. It's like, in a way, toddlers in a kindergarten, right? We want them to play and discover, but we don't want them to throw things at the windows. That's how you could think about immune cells. We want them to defend and be strong, but as well, strong only at the time when it's needed, not when there is no danger in our body.
So this reminds me of sort of a follow-up question with regards to the development of cancer treatments. And in particular, I'm thinking about CAR T cells. These are this novel approach to trying to use your own immune system, your T cells in particular, to attack cancer cells. And it works. It's very effective. But interestingly, the clinical trials are now suggesting that this could be a potential novel therapy for the treatment of lupus. So maybe starting with Samantha, you can answer, how is it that CAR T cells, when you have this hyperactivated immune system or immune T cells, also be used, essentially, given what Ioana just said, as a therapy for lupus?
Okay, so CAR T cells, I remember when I was an undergraduate and I did immunology, and they were not even in phase 1 clinical trials yet. CAR stands for chimeric antigen receptor. So essentially what they do is they take blood from a patient, they isolate the T cells in their blood, they grow them in culture, and then they engineer the T cell receptor on that T cell to recognize a target of their choosing. In cancer, they'll usually use cancer antigens, but for autoimmune diseases, they tend to use a molecule called CD19, or CD20, which is expressed only on B cells. B cells are the specialist immune cells in your body that produce autoantibodies, and they form a large part of the autoimmune cascade that does a lot of damage. So essentially what they've done is they've engineered these T cells to go in and kill the autoreactive pathogenic immune cells in the body. It's a wonderful piece of technology. There are downsides to it, as there is to all of it. Really, my only issue with it is the cost. The estimated cost of a single dose of CAR T therapy is $2 million, which I'm a very big proponent of the idea that a cure is not a cure if it's not accessible. So it creates kind of a two-tier system. And I know, like, obviously with the accent, I am not a Central New York native. I can't foresee a circumstance in which the British NHS would pay that for every lupus patient either. I don't say that to discount the absolutely scientific marvel of engineering that they are. What has also been done is, I don't know if you've heard of bispecific antibodies, which take the same idea. So it's an engineered antibody that recognizes CD3, which is on T cells, and CD19, which is on B cells, and it physically locks those two cells together, and it mimics a CAR T cell, but with a biologic off the shelf that is still, 3 figures, but not 2 million. They are wonderful when they work. But I think you need a range of toolboxes. Not every lupus patient is the same. I would say if you know one lupus patient, you know one lupus patient. So it's a great idea, but I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah. So, for those of you in the audience, I've always talked about how lupus is a very personal disease for me and my family. My mother was diagnosed in 1986, and she passed away of this disease in 2009. And throughout the course of that disease, for the majority of the time, we didn't really know what it was. Number two, we didn't know how to treat it. And she ended up dying of pancreatic cancer because of the terrible corticosteroid therapies that were currently being used to help treat her. And while it was mostly controlled, and I would say today can be a controlled disease, people still don't know a lot about it. So, the number of women who get diagnosed with lupus is somewhere around 300,000 people every year. That's a pretty devastating number. And so I'd like to have you guys, maybe you want to, just talk to people about how is this diagnosed today? Is it still from when my mother was diagnosed, a process of elimination, essentially? Or is there a real diagnostic for treatment or for identifying this particular disease in women?
This is the question I think every physician would like to have the answer. Yes, we have the test and we can diagnose straight away. I think there is not yet a test which gonna say, yes, you have a lupus, you have rheumatoid arthritis, you have something different. And the reason for it is because in systemic lupus, all organs can be affected. And because you have all the patients coming with a different organ complication, we are sidetracked first to identify whether the organ itself is not the driving force behind disease. And what I think there is a significant progress and done thus far in a systemic view of the disease itself is that women are not anymore recognized as the only complaining one when they say, I'm fatigued, I'm very, very tired, which is actually the first sign that your body might have a developing lupus. Before, anytime any person is saying they are tired, there is always some kind of assumption or excuse which is not going into the medical diagnosis. Now, women, when they are coming to rheumatology clinics, have a strong voice to say, I'm really fatigued, and fatigue can actually show the symptom, can be one of the first symptoms that our immune system is attacking our body, and therefore the person is feeling tired. Coming back to the key question, there are still more than 10 different points which the doctor is checking when you come for diagnosis, whether you have sores, whether you have autoantibodies, whether you have a high level of certain cytokines. And the problem is that we cannot right now, even for all this above 10 points, and I have the feeling that every conference, they want to add another point which going to be diagnosing us for the lupus. There is no one clinic where you can send all the blood and have it tested, but you have to send to many specialized. So what we researchers are trying to do is trying to identify those biomarkers which will enable us to diagnose the lupus really at the early stages, when it's not yet the adaptive immunity which we just talked about involved, but really at the beginning when our body is misfiring and thinking that something in our environment, together with the genes which define us, make our body think that my system have to work and it is not the right. So I think the goal is really to look for the biomarkers of the early stage and have those people on a lookout. And that's, I think, the future to cut the time and have people followed and treated before the major organs are broken or high doses of steroids are needed, which affected your mom so badly.
Thank you. I'll follow up with that because you mentioned it's a systemic disease. So when you talk about biomarkers, are you talking about biomarkers for within a specific tissue, or are you talking about just generally in the blood flow?
I think the future is in our blood, which I think blood is a tissue on its own. It's an organ on its own. And I think, and it's this beautiful organ or tissue, if you want to say it this way, because it's like the disease systemic, because it's passing through all the organs. And looking for the biomarkers in this specific niche, I think is the niche to identify early enough those signals which can tell us, oh, this person should not have the cytokine. The cytokines are little molecules which are like little messengers, text messages sent between cell to cell. There is a danger somewhere. You better be activated, and something bad's gonna happen. You should shoot all artillery you have. So if we can identify those cytokines being persistent in a person at the really early stages, which we cannot pinpoint a specific organ, I think we're gonna have more power to diagnose it earlier and prevent, I think, in end effect, organ damage.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to turn it to Samantha to ask about current therapies. So corticosteroids obviously are a Band-Aid. They're not used to actually treat the disease. They're basically ameliorating symptoms. Is there anything on the horizon? Is there something that we might be looking forward to? Is there something already on the market that is effective for lupus?
So a lot of the current therapeutics really revolve around treating the symptoms of lupus rather than the cause. You'll find alongside corticosteroids, there's a lot of repurposed cancer chemotherapy drugs that are used, which come with a lot of the same deleterious side effects. A lot of other autoimmune diseases have seen kind of revolutionary treatment in cytokine blockers. So as I was saying, these little text messages that are sent between cells, we can generate drugs that soak them up and they intercept the message and stop them being passed on. Lupus hasn't really benefited from that kind of biological revolution, and a lot of it is to do with that complexity. So I think really moving forward, a lot of the treatment strategies are going to be combinatorial therapies, so combining new drugs that treat B cells, T cells, and innate immune cells all together. I think, especially in my career, a lot of the time, the conferences I've been to, everything's zoned in on, we want a T cell only therapeutic or a B cell only therapeutic. And for a systemic disease, it's in the name, it's a system. So to just take one part of that out, I don't think is going to be sufficient. What I am really looking forward to is kind of the explosion we've seen in our field, phosphatases, which are small molecules that help cells talk to each other. These were really understudied until about 10 years ago, where mutations in these enzymes were linked to autoimmune diseases, and inhibitors of them were developed for cancer. They're now being repurposed for autoimmunity. And I think we're going to see a lot more come on the market into phase 1 and 2 clinical trials from that, but also the holistic approach. I think one of the benefits for myself coming here and working in an institute that does very different things to what I did as a PhD is the multidisciplinary approach. Autoimmunity is not just an immunological disease, it's every organ in the body. So that multidisciplinary approach is going to revolutionize treatment. And I also think it's going to be down to really being able to phenotype the individual patient and match the treatment to them the first time round. Like a lot of other chronic disorders, there is a lot of art into figuring out what's going to work for a patient as well as science. I think we need more science in that process. So one of the things that happened at my old institute is we were the first centre in Scotland that got tumour sequencing. So anyone who was diagnosed with cancer at our hospital, their tumour was sequenced. They were matched to their chemotherapy, and we saw probably about 50% success rate. I think that's what needs to happen with autoimmune disease as well. So we start sequencing, we start matching patients to the first treatment, the right time. Well, the right treatment the first time round.
Hey, thank you. That's very nice. So I'm going to now turn it to a very personal question about why are you working on lupus and what is your research, Ioana?
Why do I work on lupus? I can be honest, and I can be honest for the public, like, oh, I don't know, because of the disease. I actually got interested in lupus because I love the small molecule which is in our body, which is called ribonucleic acid. And I'm actually a biophysicist and chemist by education. And I always was fascinated how viruses can, the RNA, specifically the RNA viruses, how they can get in our cell and try to evade all the, mechanism we have to protect them. So our cells should know that, hey, here's the RNA virus, we should eliminate it. And what viruses started doing is trying to look like our own RNA. And by looking at that, I thought, this is really fascinating. What if we can figure it out when human RNA looks like the viral RNA and then stimulates our body? And sure enough, the first disease I looked up, which could fit this, was systemic lupus erythematosus. I also have personal links to autoimmunity. Autoimmunity runs in my family, and as you and your mom, my grandma was fighting with autoimmunity for many, many years and never been really properly diagnosed, never been really treated, never been really taken seriously for not feeling well, and very often accused of, oh, you just don't want to work, right? Or you just want to stay at home, or you just don't feel like. No, she just did not feel well, and nobody could understand. And now that I know way more about it, and I was pregnant myself, I have children, and I actually know what fatigue is. And I think it's one of the driving reasons that I would like to make a difference for all the women, and as well men in ages when they become predisposed to development of autoimmune diseases, to be understood that fatigue might be the first sign of a disease, not just not having a a drive to do things. And it is really changing our lives. Fatigue really is the first thing which changes of how we run and how we enjoy our life. So in a way, are we treating lupus or are we treating a variety of diseases? So these are my personal perks.
Samantha.
So when I was a graduate student, my best friend got very, very sick. And I remember watching her hospitalized over and over again, not understanding anything. And we both had basically almost PhDs in medicine. We worked at, our lab was in a university hospital. We weren't taken seriously. She was called hysterical, everything under the sun. Turns out it was lupus. At the same time, I was going through my own diagnosis journey. So I was diagnosed with a chronic pain disorder. It took me 14 years to get a diagnosis. I know what it's like to not be believed, for people to think you're hysterical, for people to blame you. And then to get to the end of that, be given a name for something that's wrong with you, and that comes with the caveat of, well, we can't fix it, so man up and get on with it. It's not a fate I want for anyone else. And I've always been a big believer. A friend once told me the phrase, human beings are the universe made sentient, attempting to understand itself. And it's always resonated with me, and that's how I would like to approach my life or my research. Is I want to leave the universe a little bit better than it was when I came in. I don't want the next generation, the generations that come after us, to have to go through those journeys only to come out with kind of the floor falling out and there's nothing that can be done. They deserve better than that.
So really nice stories from both of you. So we've at the Masonic Medical Research Institute been so fortunate because we happen to be neighbors to the Lupus and Allied Diseases Incorporation with the leadership of Kathleen Arnson, who has been incredibly supportive of the MMRI. LADA has given the institution over $800,000 so far in research to support lupus developments. And we have grown from one project, which I brought here from Beth Israel Deaconess when I came 8 years ago, to now over 5 or 6 different projects in lupus here at the Institute. And what I'd like to do is, say welcome, first of all, to Ioana, because she's now our newest affiliated faculty who's going to be working with lupus and hopefully starting with us officially as a research assistant professor in October. So we're excited to welcome her and also have her also bring her research in lupus to MMRI. So maybe now you can just tell us a little bit more specifically about the work that you're working on, the projects that you're doing to help facilitate the development of the new generation of drugs.
So my work is focused on 2 aspects. First of all, we are really trying to figure it out if we can do a better test to stratify lupus patients for one or another treatment. Because as Samantha said, those lupus patients, the stratification and personalization of medicine is the future. Not every patient gonna have activated pathways which are responsible normally for viral activation. Not every patient gonna have the same genetic mutation responsible for one or another cytokine. They can have for those cytokines which are related to the viruses, or they can have to the cytokines which are related to production of autoantibodies without any activation before. So I'm focusing, my first year is focusing on developing those methods, and we have one patent in a pipeline which is focused on detection of one of the cytokines, which is only in femtograms in our circulation, and we found a way with biophysics and metal enhancements and crazy lasers of how to detect molecules which are related to the cytokine at the very, very early stages, and then pick those patients who have it for specific treatment to shut down the cytokine communication. The problem right now in lupus is that we have many drugs in clinical trials, but we do not stratify the patients. That's why many of those trials fail, have not really good outcomes. If we could, before we give the drug, stratify the patients and give the right drug to the right person, the outcomes would be much better and more people could profit out of it in a better way. My second, like the more scientific underground, not underground, like the basic line is to understand how environment can actually activate those first innate immune responses, which precipitate everything afterwards. So I'm really interested, what do I have to have? What kind of genes and what kind of environmental exposure, or whether it's going to be just too much sun, too much pollution, or too much of a certain virus, which gonna drive my immune system get really crazy. So, and I investigate this on the level of really, you could say, biophysics using electron microscopy and signal cell sequencing and other very modern techniques to do that, to really see at the molecular resolution how all this can affect specifically, actually, going back to the fatigue, which I emphasize so much, the powerhouse of our cells, which are the mitochondria. So a lot of those pathways which are initially activated during viral infection or environmental exposure actually lead to active dysfunction of the mitochondria, which are producing the energy for us to be youthful. Some people think that getting mitochondria from a young person into your body gonna make you really superhero. So that's what I'm working on.
Wonderful. Samantha, I know you're one of many people in the lab working on lupus, but do you have 2 or 3 projects if you'd like to share about that?
Okay, so a lot of my work on lupus focuses on a specialist cohort of cells called T cells. T cells are responsible for activating B cells to make antibodies, but also another subset called CD8 T cells are responsible for killing virally infected cells. I like to call these cells, they will literally walk up to a virally infected cell and they have these things called perforins. And I remember my mind being blown when I saw these for the first time. They're little straw-shaped structures and the T cell will walk up and just punch a hole in the other cell and the cell explodes. And that's great if you've got a virus. It's not great when the immune system mistakes your own DNA as foreign and starts to attack it. I think that's also one of the really heartbreaking things for me about lupus is the immune system is doing what it thinks is the right thing. It's obeying its programming, its instructions, and it thinks it's protecting you when it's not. So my work focuses on trying to figure out how that signal gets passed inside the cell. Why does the T cell think that your DNA is foreign and abnormal and it should kill it? And a lot of that work focuses on the T cell receptor and how it assembles and how it signals downstream. So to cut a lot of really complicated molecular biology short, once a T cell turns on, it turns off its T cell receptor. The T cell receptor gets degraded, so it can't signal anymore. So your T cells should only hear the instruction once. In lupus, the T cell will sort of jerry-rig a working T cell. So it takes another protein that looks really similar to it and just kind of janks it in. Like I used to get really frustrated with Legos as a kid. I just banged them together. The cell kind of does that and it creates a receptor complex that can signal again. One of the molecules we study, SHP2, is required to make that kind of janky T cell receptor. So targeting that is probably going to be a bona fide therapeutic for T cell dysfunction. Another one of my projects is looking at how that molecule also works in innate immune cells, macrophages and dendritic cells, since they're responsible for presenting antigen to the immune system and activating things. What we have found is that during lupus, the whole immune system becomes dysregulated, and a lot of the same molecules are responsible for that dysregulation in different cell types. What changes is the downstream genes that are turned on. So trying to detangle that and work out how they're talking to each other is really my goal. I like to call myself a molecular linguist. because that's what we do. We study how cells talk to each other. And by decoding that language, we'll be able to design drugs to target it.
Oh, thank you. Great answers. So I'm going to open it up to the audience and to all of our colleagues and friends online for some questions. And as people are getting ready and putting the questions into the chat here, one question that I think that people might be interested in trying to understand is, why are there seemingly socioeconomic differences in individuals that develop lupus? As I mentioned before, it seems to have an increased propensity in disparity groups, and it's hard to understand why that seems to be a common thread. Is it genetic? Is it socioeconomic? Is it environmental? Is it a combination of all three? And if you can comment on any of those things.
Well, okay. I think it's a combination of all three. I think you have to look at things really holistically from a whole society point of view. Especially on this side of the Atlantic, you look at people who are socially economically disadvantaged do not get preventative care the same way everyone else does. You have people present later. They're also doing jobs where they're more likely to be exposed to either pathogens. So I know a lot of friends during the pandemic couldn't afford to not be at work. They were exposed to the virus because they had to go to work. And we know that viral infection is probably the main precipitating effect for autoimmune disease development. Couple that with inability to access care, probably living in areas that don't have as good care as other areas. I know especially back in the UK, we call it the postcode lottery. So areas that are disadvantaged and underserved, like some of the really inner city areas of Glasgow, you have one doctor for every 800 people, whereas if you go to areas like Bearsden, they've got one doctor for every 100 people. So it's a huge mix of factors between money, resources, and also the understanding. There is a lot of bias in healthcare. There's a lot of unintentional bias. I don't think it's like a provider's meanness. Well, a lot of the times, like my sister's a nurse. I think she's online actually. And she said to me once, like, she wasn't taught how rashes look on people with darker skin. Things like that. So you have a lot of factors that come together. And it's one of the things I'm really passionate about as a researcher is, like, we can do all the molecular biology we want. But if people can't access that new treatment, they're not being diagnosed properly, it's not going to have the impact that we would like it to have. On that note, the more disadvantaged someone is within several different areas, because a lot of these intersect with each other, the later they are to get diagnosed, and the later the diagnosis, the more damage has already been done. An early diagnosis is really important to helping people improve their lives, because when someone develops lupus nephritis and their kidneys become damaged, we can't undo the damage to the kidney. We can prevent it, we can't undo it. So I think it's a huge range of factors that I could probably teach an entire university course on if I wanted to be honest. But it's a very, very complicated situation that doesn't have a good clean answer.
One of the questions online is, are we closer to a cure for lupus? Ivana.
Oh, wow. That's $1 million or $1 billion question to answer. I think we are every day, because we work on it, and we do what we do right now here. We make the patient try to understand the scientific background of the disease, so they participate in clinical trials. They can raise the voice for themselves and ask for different strategies for the treatment. And I think with this combination of science, patients, physicians coming together and trying to understand each other, we can accelerate the development of better drugs, better stratification for lupus. Doing everything in suspension, everyone alone, physicians in their offices, nurses in the other offices, patients not really understanding what is going on out there, I think we will never achieve what we really want, which is the better cure, the better stratification and the area, and to make, maybe not cure completely, because there is nothing complete here. Besides, I think death is the complete thing, which we all know gonna come to us. And there is no perpetuum mobile, but I think doing better, it only comes if we start working together, not against each other. And I think there is a hope. There is a lot of stuff going out right now with the communication being much better and access to information being much better. I think we can get our forces together and grow from there. I only worry that the immune cells start using TikTok, like my son, and there I don't know what we're gonna do.
Another question that's come up is, are there any new therapies or clinical advancements that you're really excited about?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I'm really excited about the bispecific antibodies. I think it's a really incredible strategy to treat a lot of really severe cases of autoimmunity. One of the things I'm also really excited about coming on board is the new generation of small molecule inhibitors. So small molecule inhibitors are little small chemicals rather than big proteins, because antibodies are proteins. They're a lot cheaper to make, they're a lot faster to make. I think it's a real blending of disciplines. So a lot of these small molecule inhibitors are being repurposed from cancer trials. They target pathways that cause proliferation. So we're targeting the bits of your body that make too many immune cells doing that. And I think they're going to provide a really cost-effective mechanism for new autoimmunity treatments. And I'm really excited about that aspect.
That's really nice. Last question that seems to be popping up here is, what can we do to help our families, patients, and advocates support each other with lupus?
Believe them. I know that sounds really simple, but even I found in my own experiences, my friends are like, oh, you're so flaky. And I'm like, I cannot get off the floor today. I am in tears. And people think you're kind of making it up. And there comes a point as a chronic illness person where you stop talking about it because people don't believe you. And I say that is sometimes did more psychological damage to me than the fact that I couldn't access treatment. I also think you need to be their advocate. It's a very hard healthcare journey, standing up for them and being by their side and saying to a doctor, like, no, you need to run this test. So they're not doing all the fighting themselves. But I also think one of the greatest things you can do is to simply be there. And you can't really understand what it's like to have a chronic illness unless you have one. And I don't ask for my family or my friends to understand. I just ask them to give me a little bit of grace sometimes when I'm not doing well. But I think the other thing that really needs to be done is advocating for a change of some of the structures we have in society that have resulted in the fact that they are understudied, under-researched, and as badly educated within providers as they are. So I think actually a lot of the advocacy work outside of the research we do needs to go into building better systems to deal with it overall.
Ioana, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I can only deter to whatever Samantha said. And I always kind of test what can we do on my own kids, because I know they are sort of innate to it. And I was talking with my son and I asked him, do you actually know what I'm doing? Yeah, are you doing cancer? No. Heart diseases? No. So what are you doing? I'm like, you could call it rheumatology. And he said, like, wow, that's out of space. Our children don't know it. And I think the pandemic made us a sort of a favor to autoimmune diseases, because we discovered something on a huge scale as a long COVID. And I think people first started understanding that remnants of viral infection, long after we are not sneezing and coughing, can actually affect your body. So I think education at the really early ages, that there is not only cancer, there is not only heart attack, and there is no only, I don't know, broken bone. It will make people aware from the beginning. And this will be specifically critical for young women because these are the major target population of systemic lupus erythematosus. They get signs of being diseased long before, and then pregnancy accelerates the disease. And then when they are properly diagnosed, because, oh boy, they have to take care of the baby, but they are not really, taken seriously before they have the little beautiful thing in their arms. So I think education and research is the key for us to understand that there is a diversity of diseases, and some of them will not present the way, as you think about diseased person, the person in a wheelchair, the person with a broken hand or missing something. No, actually, on most of the cases, it's a beautiful woman who are sick. Everyone knows Selena Gomez. People accused her of taking drugs, and what she had seizure caused by lupus while she was performing. And so much misunderstanding because people don't really know. They TikTok everything, but they don't know that there are diseases. Maybe we should do a TikTok group about systemic diseases and have our children educated. My son just learned about ticks spreading of microbes which can make him not be able to eat red meat. And he was like, wow, is this one of those diseases which you study? This is so bizarre. I'm like, yeah, and fascinating, right? Yeah, it is fascinating. They don't know it. We teach on how the cell works, how many cells we have in a body, how whatever else, but maybe we should kind of make our education more targeted to understand the diseases from early on and have them associated with everyday activities we do and which activities can affect that. So we can on our own recognize the first symptoms earlier. I don't know, it's maybe preaching and hand waving what I'm saying right now, but that's what I always take the clues from our own children.
Thank you. We have a couple questions in the audience.
So my friend joined the Facebook Live a little late, so she apologizes if you already answered this, but one of her family members recently was diagnosed with lupus. She's wondering what are the signs that maybe like she was missing? Because they all kind of seem very like shocked at this point that this is what she's been diagnosed with. And for someone who's just been diagnosed, what are like first steps? What should she looking into? Where should she be going for advice and things like that?
Samantha, you want to take that on?
Yeah, so one of the really difficult things about lupus is a lot of the symptoms are very non-specific. So fatigue really is the first symptom. People feel like beyond tired. The only way I can describe the kind of fatigue you get with a disorder like that is sometimes I feel like my soul is tired inside and there's nothing I can do to make it better. Followed by usually skin problems. So actually lupus derives its name from the butterfly rash that people would classically present with, having random allergic reactions to things, having random inflammatory bouts. And a lot of that kind of progresses onwards. So lupus usually comes on flares, remission, flares again, remission. And those non-specific symptoms is really what makes it so difficult to diagnose. And it just comes as a shock to people because they go, I mean, I had a friend who got diagnosed with lupus who expected to be told she had like a vitamin D deficiency or something to come out of like thousands of dollars of tests later. She was floored by it. The one thing I will say is it is often flooring to get a chronic disorder diagnosis. It feels like the world is caving in on you sometimes. It's not, I promise. It will feel really overwhelming at first. The biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone with any diagnosis is learn, learn, learn. the greatest weapon in this universe is knowledge. And the more you know about it and the more you understand what's happening inside your body, the more power you will feel over it. And the more you will be able to efficiently advocate for yourself and become a complete partner in your care journey, where you can discuss with your specialist one-on-one really in detail what it is you should be doing. And it should be your specialist you're listening to. Ignore everything else. Don't go on TikTok. Don't PubMed it. Don't ask AI. Speak to your doctor in that one-on-one terms and really dive in and learn about your own disorder. Because from someone, probably a bit preachy as well, from someone with personal experience, learning what my disorder was, how it worked, why it worked the way it was, and also like the mechanisms of how the drugs I was taking worked made me feel like a superhuman sometimes, because I could go in and have sincere discussions with my care team rather than going in and being told what I was going to do. It's like, no, I have a say in this. I think having power over your own journey makes a difference in that journey and helps you live a better life, because it's going to give you the power to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and I can tell you from somebody who watched lupus happen, I was 13 when my mom was diagnosed. I think as a patient, women in particular kind of blow things off. I'm just tired. I'm not feeling so great. Oh, maybe I just need a little break. Maybe this was a lot of stress. And people ignore, I think, a lot of the major symptoms that come along until it's often too late. I think that happens for not just autoimmune disease, but any disease. But watching my mom, I think definitely the first symptom that was noticeable as a family member was the skin rash. And that was interesting at the time, because in 1986, nobody had seen lupus. And she went to specialist after specialist after specialist, telling her it was all kinds of things that they specialized in. So it was either, an allergy, or it was bone cancer, or it was leukemia, it was all kinds of things. And lupus was never the diagnosis. She was diagnosed because she was in Greece, lost about 50 pounds, I think, at the time, and really deathly ill and in the hospital. And it was a resident in Greece who walked by her and said, when you see the doctor, you tell them you have lupus. And then when we looked it up at that time, I wondered why it was possible in this country. They missed it. It was just so obvious then, even then. And I think the problem in part too is we are so focused on what we're studying that we miss the bigger picture. We're caught in the weeds and we're not focusing on the forest. And I think we need to step back sometimes and really kind of take a look at our lives and figure out, like, this isn't normal. We need to be out there. We need to advocate for our health and make sure that we're taking care of each other. And if you notice it also in someone you love, making sure that you're not too afraid to speak up and ask them to go see someone, because it can be obvious. And the joint pain is the other thing. It feels a lot like arthritis. It feels like osteoarthritis. It feels like we're getting older. It feels like a common pain. But all those things put together means that it's not a normal thing. And, the drugs that are out there are not amazing. That's why we're working on it, and we're trying to find better solutions to solving this and a lot of other types of autoimmune diseases. So I think let's close. We're getting close to 7 o'clock. Maybe we'll close with some finishing remarks and words of wisdom with regards to what to do next, or what to expect next in the realm of lupus. And Juan, I'll start with you.
My closing remark is that MMRI is doing a fantastic job about lupus. When I came to Central New York 6 years ago to Syracuse, I was thinking, where's the lupus work? Why don't we talk with patients? And I had to wait till the moment I met Maria, and I think it makes a huge difference because we make physicians aware of it. They are so busy running, not only listening to the patient, running all the tests and trying to figure it out how to comprehend all the insurance we have to deal with, but then the they have partners in us to come and get patients educated and have connections to bring clinical trials to our region where patients can be treated for free when they are in clinical trials. That's a huge thing, but we can only do that when we all stand together and bring the technology, companies, patients, physicians, and everyone together to be a competitive place and support this region in fighting systemic lupus erythematosus, because it is really systemic and affects many, many women which are till the last day not really properly diagnosed and not treated to have the best of the life they could.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to be not sex biased at the end. I would like to say something that the last case I was working with wonderful physician, pathologist actually, was a case of lupus in a man, in a 60-year-old man who never been sick before, healthy, not obese, nothing happened. We just published a paper about his case. And it then came COVID. And nobody wanted to believe that the non-susceptible person gonna have a lupus. With very curious collaboration between the pathologist, nephrologist, and us, we could identify all the markers of typical lupus. And finally, when he was diagnosed with lupus and treated properly, not for some kind of cancer or any other disease he could have had, he actually started doing better and is doing fantastic today. So there are exceptions, and we should never disregard anything.
That's a good point. Samantha, finishing remarks.
I think, like, professionally as a scientist, it's a really exciting time to be in autoimmunity and SLE research. It really has come a long way in even just the last 10 years since I started my career. One of the things that gets me out of bed every day is knowing that the next generation of patients won't face the same hardships as this generation of patients. What we really need is, like I was saying, is everyone working together. And we need those collaborations and we need those networks. And we need a lot of people to realize we're all on the same side and we all want the same thing. I think that really Kathleen is correct. Lupus ends with us, and that's where we should be as a group.
That's wonderful. And with that, just reminding everyone, May is Lupus Awareness Month. So please bring out as much awareness about lupus. Thank you all for coming here today. And I look forward to seeing you at the walk next year, the Lupus Walk, which will again be in May of 2027. So thank you for everyone being here and on our call. Thanks to everyone. Have a great evening.
Okay.